Dida Halke Titsta. My name is Dida Halke. Dida Halke Titsta. Stahobschad. I am Snahomish. Stahobschad. It's Sasdale Chud at the Kent. I live here in Kent. Cheat, nearby, not too far from the museum here. I grew up in Port Angeles and worked for the city of Kent, where this museum is located. Retired after 30 years of service in the fire department. And so now being retired, I have a little more flexible time to do things like carving, help the museum, and also operate the Blue Heron canoe that we travel every summer in, or nearly every summer. A couple years ago, I was invited to speak, and then they invited me to come join the Greater Kent Historical Society. They were interested in doing some of the same things that I'm doing. They did not have a native presence. They were curious about the native culture, and I was interested in providing them more information. One of the things I asked them, well, what, on this very spot, prior to 1850, what happened here? And they looked at me with a blank stare, and basically their answer was nothing. They had no history, but there was a history here. It just wasn't written. For hundreds of years before that, there was a thriving culture here. And so I had a little bit of insight, and so I'm sharing with them some of my insight, some of my teachings. They're getting quite an education out of it, and I'm enjoying it, being able to tell people a little bit about what was here before. Again, I was raised in Port Angeles, grew up there, didn't quite finish high school before we moved into the Puget Sound area. My dad always was one, because he did not have a lot of cash, a lot of money, he worked a lot with his hands and built things. And so I had that inspiration from him. It was my mother that was native, but he inspired me to do some things with my hands. Starting in about 1994 or so, I started getting much more heavily involved in native things. I had a log that I was trying to carve in. We brought it down here and I started carving on this last fall. We're carving a welcome figure. Welcome figures were those that were on the beach to welcome the travelers in, and usually they were holding up their hands with their palms towards them as a gesture of welcome. You see a lot of native people doing that sort of thing. Welcome. Part of that process of imagining is looking at pictures, seeing what's out there and what's available, and then picking a style you kind of want to follow. The design is all mine, but I'm influenced by some local carvers, including those that carved poles for the Duwamish, Michael Halliday, and I'll probably make it more of a spirit-looking face rather than a human-looking face. So there's a little bit of difference between the two. Today is a grand reopening, so after COVID, the city finally opened up, and then shortly thereafter, the museum did. It's been almost a year and a half since we've been able to do stuff like this. It's kind of a kickoff for when we get the carving done, possibly as early as September, and having another ceremony, gathering of native people as well, singing and dancing and celebrating the placement of the welcome figure here at the museum. So it'll be put in a place so that it's near the walkway and facing the parking lot, so as you get out of your vehicle, it's one of the first things you see. It's a welcome from the native people. Here at the museum, we were going to focus in on one activity to start with. They did not have totem poles in the Puget Sound area. They came from Alaska. And the first one to show up in Seattle was stolen from an Alaska village in 1899. That was the first totem pole in Seattle, Tacoma area. But since then, everybody has recognized them as culturally as coming from the First people, First Nations. They associate it with the people from here as well. And so you'll see a lot of totem poles, even local artists carving poles. I decided that what I was going to carve was tiny in comparison and probably would only be good for just a welcome figure, more like a demonstration. We had a tree that was donated to us. Behind me is a result of our starting to carve. I hope that everybody that comes to the museum comes and goes, oh, what's that? And then it creates that wonderment, curiosity, and hopefully they'll take that with them, as well as some bits and pieces of information that the native people were here and thriving before any of the pioneers arrived.